Okay, so welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we've got Lee Englestone, who's Head of Innovation for Userware. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Head of Innovation, that's quite a wide subject, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
What does it include for you?
Well, head of innovation can mean lots of different things in lots of different organizations. I've seen it aligned with marketing, with sales, with technology. I quite like to think of innovation as like this holistic end-to-end process involved in everywhere, every place from in the product development lifecycle, from inception to creation to delivery.
Okay.
And that includes sales and marketing and all that. So my day-to-day involves using my deep knowledge of technology, building proof of concepts for clients, but also thinking about the value proposition around those products and how that aligns with what the client's trying to achieve.
Sure.
And then how to take it to market, like the go-to-market strategy and the different markets and different industries that these innovations can be used in. So quite a few things, really.
Yeah. So just a few. Sounds really interesting. Well, I first saw you and you were giving a talk at the Stockport a digital network.
That's right.
Is it? Yeah. And about immersive technology, which was really fascinating, actually, and which prompted me to say, I'd like you to come and talk about that. Is that your kind of main interest these days?
I am interested in the application of technology to improve things, to meet business requirements, to help businesses grow. And it's really interesting because like I said, I come from a really technical background. I can build you anything: mobile, cloud, web, AI, XR. But I find that in a lot of organizations, there's still a silo between the technology and the business and the product and the people, whereas I kind of like to bridge and have one foot in different camps. So I have one foot in the technology camp, one foot in the business and strategy camp, one foot in the product camp. And I'm able to do that because I've got this deep technology experience, but also just finished a master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation. So spent 2-3 years learning business models, value proposition, market sizing, all this, and how it's not just the technology that you need to make a business successful, but how you sell that, how you market it. It's these days I find it's the best marketers win, not the best products. And I see this a lot, that you can have the best product, but if another company can easily outmarket you, so you've got to have good product, good marketing, and all that sales distribution as well.
Bringing a bit of synergy to
100%. But like I said, it's too siloed at the moment. Sometimes having a holistic overview of end-to-end innovation, like I said, is something that's lacking in a lot of organizations. Some organizations front load the innovation, so they'll go into clients and say, right, we'll do an innovation workshop, we'll do business model canvas with you, and we'll do all this, and said, right, this is the innovation bit, next go build it. But then the innovation's kind of lost later in the process. And then on the flip side, I've seen organizations where the innovation all happens in the building process. So it's missed it at the beginning and you miss it at the end. It's all in the building of the product. I think it needs to be end to end. I really do. And I'm a big believer in the aggregation of marginal gains. So 1% improvements in everything, every single thing, whether it's your marketing, your sales, your onboarding. And that's the way you out innovate your competitors is just, doesn't have to be like innovative breakthrough technologies. It can just be lots and lots and lots of little improvements, and I think if you do that correctly, you can out innovate your opponents, business competitors.
competitors. It's interesting what you say there, because having worked in a number of software companies, more on a client-facing role, often you're constantly communicating to clients, especially if they're paying a lot of money for the software, what the new innovations are that are coming, what the next version is going to include, what that's going to cost. And then, so you're constantly leading up to that and building up the positivity around it. And then when you get to it, that innovation that you've been talking about isn't there, or they've not completed it on this output, and so there is that disconnect between what's delivered, what and the realities of that, I suppose, being able to do that.
Absolutely. I find this in a lot of organizations is that in the business leaders, the CTOs, the CEOs, the CMOs, they all know that innovation is really, really important. And from top down, like, we need to be more innovative, we need to do this, we put it into our values, our culture. And I think all the ICs, the individual contributors, who are usually the ones that are building the product, they also understand the importance of innovation. What I find is that something's lost between the leadership and the delivery, and I dare say it's often middle management who just want to keep the status quo, want to keep the jobs, keep doing what they've always done, and meet their KPIs and OKRs. So it's not an easy thing to bring innovation to a business, because a lot of it's political, not technological problems. But it's an interesting one.
So skipped ahead of it there. How if you always been, was kind of computing, technology, programming always natural to you? Was there always an interest in it? How did you get into it?
Sure. So I have to go back a few years now, but I did chemistry, physics, maths, computing at A level. I also did astronomy.
All the easy subjects.
All the easy subjects, yeah. I won't tell you what grades I got for them, but I did do them and passed them all. And I also did a GCSE in astronomy because I really like space.
Yeah.
And I did even more so back then. But then when it came to choosing universities, I looked at like astrophysics, cosmology, and astronomy.
Yeah.
And I thought, do you know what? There's probably not that many jobs in that field out there. So no pun intended, I decided to keep my feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, computing, that sounds like there's probably going to be something in the future. This is going to be big. So I did computation at University of Manchester and stayed in that field ever since, and did what all the developers did, was started off as a junior, then middle, then senior. And then when they realised you're not going to burn the building down, they might get you to lead a team or a technical element. And I spent the majority of my career as a software development manager, which is making decisions around what technologies we should use, hiring, firing, and stuff like that. The number of CVs and interviews I've done with people is a lot. And then you kind of start to drift away from the hands-on technology and the decisions as you delegate that to people a little bit more up to date, to these days. But yeah, but all the time while I was doing all this technology, I'm one of these people that look around the business and think that could be done better. That could be done better. So I always find myself putting these improvements in place, mainly in the technology space. But sometimes I'll say, well, have we ever thought about building this product or this service?
Yeah.
And what I also find in organizations, and not all organizations by any means, is that they want the technologists to keep in their lane, and they're like, no, we've got business analysts, we've got product managers to do that. You just build what we tell you to do. But it's the technologists that know what the art of the possible is. They know that actually we could also build this, or we could build this better. And sometimes your product managers, your product developers, even your CTOs, they don't actually know what the art of the possible is. So I think they should be listening more to the technologists a bit more. So I think if you listen to technologists, I think you won't go far wrong.
Sounds like we're thinking similar way. It used to really frustrate me, any bottlenecks in processes or communication or anything like that that was holding the business back and my success with what I wanted to do. And you could see it if you have that mind where you see patterns and procedures and looking constantly for improvements and how could that be done better, then it can be quite frustrating. Were you frustrated by it sometimes, or are you just looking at the kind of possibilities?
I'm quite a lateral thinker, so I do get frustrated because I see so many opportunities and possibilities all the time. But then you learn very quickly that in order to make change and influence change, you need to play the game. You need to not complain. You need to put a business case together and say, if we do this way, then it will save this amount. And once you've got that hard data, that hard facts to then take to leadership and say, look, I've done due diligence. If we do this way, it will save this amount of time and resources. It's very hard to then ignore that, because that's their job, is to implement these improvements. So yeah, you have to be a bit savvy sometimes when you have to implement change. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were at Manchester, was there a point where you thought, I've made the right choice here, I like this stuff? So, you know, I did computer science at university, and my view was kind of, this doesn't come naturally to me, but I'll keep going. Which is probably very different to your experience.
It is a bit different. I'll be honest. It's one of them. I just like the ability. I'm quite a creative person, so I quite like technology in its ability to create things from scratch. I see it almost no different from an artist stood in front of a blank canvas and have all the color palettes and all the materials, or a sculpture with a block of marble, be able to create anything from it. I see the creative process around technology being much the same. We can literally create anything these days because software runs everything, from, you know, this device, that TV, you know, your watch, the car that brought me here. It's all run by software. So yeah, it's such a powerful skill to have. And I do encourage technologists and developers to learn as many different ways of doing this as possible. So I've seen some that are just web developers, and that's fine. But I'm often surprised when I talk to web developers and say, well, have you ever thought about doing, I don't know, looking at AI? Have you ever thought about looking at mixed reality, which I'm sure we'll get onto? Have you ever thought looking at more just cloud-based technology or IoT, you know, being able to run programs on the Raspberry Pi? These all solve their own different problems. So these days, I think as a technologist and as a developer, it's very, very useful to have lots of different skills in your tool belt. Because if you've only got one tool and you can only solve a problem in one way, you're always going to use that one tool. It's like every problem becomes solvable with a hammer. You're always going to use the same approach. You also got different perspectives as well to tackle a problem from the more skills you have and experience.
So if you had any advice for anyone listening who's kind of in that situation at work where they think this could be done better, but you know, I've tried saying things before and they don't listen. You know, you've obviously been part of those kind of conversations a lot. You've probably touched on it as well, but would you have any advice for anyone approach and how to go about it?
You have to, where you can, play the game, and if your organisation hasn't already got a process for how change happens, or even, you know, back in the old days, you used to have suggestion boxes, and I think that's still a good idea. I'm surprised businesses don't have the equivalent of suggestion boxes these days. So it's about, where possible, using the existing process, because you don't want to seem to be rocking the boat. So if you can use the existing processes, gather as much data as you can to support your suggestion, and then submit it and see what it comes back with. You're either going to work for an organisation that is going to listen to ideas or not. I found there's very little in between. So sometimes also it's about building being a change you want to see as well. So it's about, well, maybe I can help put in a process for new ideas and innovations in future. I think it's becoming more rare these days because leadership are understanding they need to innovate or die. And I think any leadership that doesn't have that mindset isn't going to be around very long. So it is a tricky one. But yeah, like I said, just gather the data and put a business case together, and that's a skill in itself. You know, being able to put all the evidence in a succinct case and put your argument forward. That's a good skill to have, you know, in any role, really. And that's something else that I've recommended for my direct reports in the past is, look, I know you're in technology right now, but try and read and learn as widely as possible. So I've got a website actually called goodbusinessbooks.com, which I don't claim to have read all of them, but I've read a good majority of them.
Yeah.
And I've read books on all sorts, from product development to marketing, psychology, sales, negotiation.
Yeah.
And I think you can see how it fits in with technology often. So when you're building a product, you need to have empathy for the customers. You need to understand what they're trying to achieve, around product development.
Yeah.
And then when you're trying to negotiate anything, all those skills come in useful. So I would really recommend anyone that's trying to develop their careers in any field, really, not just technology, especially if you're a junior developer or really starting out, is to read as widely as possible in all those different topics as you can.
Sure. Do you have any books that you like, and that you go back to and recommend to people?
Definitely, yeah. So I've got a bit of a reading list that I'll recommend people, but the book that started my kind of love affair with personal development was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
And it just kind of blew my mind, and thought about all these different ways you could think about the world and different lenses you could look at it through. And ever since then, just kept on voraciously reading as many as I can. And it's important to say as well, reading these things isn't useful unless you try and implement them. And it's great to have the knowledge, but unless you're converting that and trying them out and seeing what works for you, there isn't really much point. But another few books I like is Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Yeah.
Often, too often we're being doing and not taking the time to think, right, why are we doing this? Why am I doing that? Why does the customer want this? Asking the 5 whys. There's a great book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, where a few years ago now, he analysed lots of the world's most successful companies to look for consistencies within them, to see what makes a good company. Yeah. And there's a few takeaways from that was really interesting. So things like get good people in the business and bad people out. His saying was get good people on the bus. You can always work out where they sit later, but you get good people on the bus.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I take that into my approach when I'm hiring. Previously, not in this role, but I like to hire for passion and capability. They're the 2 things I look for, really. I've seen really, really capable developers, but they lack the passion. So they're not gonna love learning something new, love a challenge. Whereas I've hired developers that maybe aren't as skilled as the others, but they have that passion to learn and grow and do more. So I always say hire for passion first.
Yeah.
But obviously capabilities are important. But yeah, like I said, read as widely as possible and then just take these things and try them out yourself.
Yeah. Sounds like a pattern through your whole life in terms of trying out technologies, giving it a go, you're trying out what you've learned in books, and it seems like, you're not afraid to give something a go. And
I think innovation for me is, and I've got a whole talk on this I've given, is about play and experimentation.
Yeah.
And I say play because often we experiment, but it's serious and it's for a particular purpose. But I think play is important.
Yeah.
Because I think look at kids, for example, they're really good at play. They're really good at experimenting as well. You give them a tray of different colours, paints, and that makes yellow and blue or even red. What if I combine Lego bricks in this way? They're really good at play and experimentation through play. But as adults, we lose some of the curiosity we have as kids. We don't think, oh, why is the sky blue? We don't question things quite as much or question different approaches.
Sure.
Quite often we fall into regular routines and we just do as we're told, to say, do this way because this is the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
So we lose that experimentation and play. So I think innovation is mainly about play and experimentation.
Yeah. The thing I obviously knew you for originally was this idea of immersive technology. And specifically, I think it was virtual reality and augmented reality, and what that is and the differences.
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
Sure. There's a few terms in there, so I'll quickly run through them. So immersive technology is like an umbrella term, sometimes referred to as extended reality or XR, which encompasses what a sofa from IKEA might look like in your living room. That's augmented reality. We've had it for years in things like fighter pilot heads-up display. That's augmented reality. It's making something look like it's there, that's actually there.
Right.
That's a lot of the immersive technology.
Yeah.
So that's augmented reality. Then you've got mixed reality, where again you can place things in the real world around you, a bit like the AR. But this time, usually it's with a headset, and the main difference between that is you've got that and AI, so you've got the headset, and there's more emphasis on being able to interact with the things, the virtual objects you put in the real world, so that's mixed reality. So you can still see the real world around you. And then you've got, on the other end of this spectrum, virtual reality, which is you can't see the real world around you. So it might look like you're in a burning building if you're doing fire training, or it might look like you're in a surgical theatre if you're training for surgery or something like that. So everything you see is a product of the application that's running. And the AR, mixed reality and VR, they've all got different use cases. They're all good and bad at different things. But together they make a really good, I think, way of, again, providing this creative canvas and this new wave of innovative possibilities.
Right.
And one way I like to look at it is the evolution of digital mediums. So if you think years and years ago now, we had when the internet became really popular, everyone's like, right, we need a website, and then everyone started selling things through websites, and everyone did everything through websites. Then there was like a shift towards mobile apps. Everyone was saying, right, we need a mobile app now, and that's mainly for convenience. So I can like check my bank balance, I can look at my Ring doorbell on my mobile app, and it's mainly for convenience because you carry it around all the time, and it's in your pocket. And then I think the next evolution is going to be these immersive technologies, and I'm not saying each evolution replaces the previous. I'm saying we get an additional amount of capabilities and use cases with them. So you've got some use cases for mobile apps that didn't have a website, and you've got some use cases with immersive technology you didn't have with apps and websites. And it's really good. You've got 360-degree freedom, so you can place all these objects around you, so we're not limited by just a small screen. We can put any objects we want in there to interact with them, scale them, rotate them. So it's a lot of more emphasis on tangibility as well, being able to interact with the items you put in there. So there's lots of different use cases for mixed reality. And I think we're really just starting to see the tip of the iceberg with the capabilities. And what was once seen as like a fad, and it's just for games, we're starting to see in more and more use cases. Personally, I think we won't have experiences where you put the headset on and you're in there for hours. That's just a personal opinion of mine. I don't see it. I think for various reasons, I don't think you would be in there for hours. What I think they're really good at is specific use cases where you pop them in, do a process that is good in mixed reality, and then take them off again. So for example, I've seen this done well in onboarding onto new businesses. So you put your headset on, and your onboarding application says, all right, this is the office that we have at the central office, and you look around and see it. Maybe see the entire org structure of the business, thousands of people with the CEO at the top, who reports to them, who reports them, who reports them by geography. The two use cases that I think they're really good at, and is something that we're pushing at Userware, is mixed reality maps and spatial charts. For two really good reasons. One, with mixed reality maps, there's so many different industries and sectors that have geospatial information and maps, everything from attractions like, I don't know, zoos, theme parks, stuff like that, from shopping malls to property developers, to heritage, like the National Trust have all got maps. But traditional maps, there's a lot of restrictions and limitations with them. So they're all flat, for starters. So the world's not flat. Sorry to any flat Earth the episodes, but the world's not flat. So with mixed reality maps, we can bring the topology in. We've got things like, we can bring real-time information in there. We can make them interactive, so you touch them. So, when, for example, when me and the family went to Disney World a couple of years ago, and at the front they've got loads of different paper maps. So in every different language, Spanish, Italian, German, English. And I was thinking, whenever they make a change to any of the rides or anything, they have to pull those maps, reprint them. So that's not great for net zero and carbon emissions and stuff like that. It doesn't help the world that we're printing all these maps.
And the time it takes.
And the time and effort as well. But if at the same time people were walking around with their phones looking for the ride times, I was thinking, well, why aren't we just showing a map on these mobile phones? Or why can't you put a headset on and have a really nice view of the park before you go there? Whether it's Disney World or Centre Parks or National Trust as well. So look, going back to the National Trust for me, some of them are hilly, and sometimes it's the older generation that visit them. So wouldn't it be great to know if that's a steep hill or not? You can't tell on a map. So that's mixed reality maps. The other one is spatial charts, which I think is really interesting because probably for decades we've been looking at data in 2 dimensions. Usually, we've got an x-axis and we've got a y-axis, and then we plot a graph like that. And we come up with lots and lots of weird and wonderful ways of representing that data, and you just have to look at any Power BI dashboard to see all the different ways with radial charts and geographic maps and scatter graphs and all the different ways of representing data. When you start looking at data in 3 dimensions with a headset on, you can have room size or table size examples. You can walk through the data. You can grab the data points and analyze them to compare them. Come here and compare them side by side. You can walk through the data, and mainly data is used for decision making and telling a story. So I think it really just bring the data to life. This immersive use of data that way.
We're probably going to give away my thoughts here, but I was listening to what you were saying in the talk, and I was sat there thinking, this would be amazing for being able to bring clarity to SEO, and being able to show you compared to your competitors and what that means. So you can see on a 2D graph in terms of the number of keywords and traffic, and the size of the circle for how much is going on. If you could bring that into 3D and bring in social media and everything else that goes around into digital footprint that one company has, and then compare that to your competitors and visibly show them the difference and then you can map out what you would do differently. I think that's an incredibly compelling way of telling us that story and showing them, well, this is what we do, and you can see this is why, because this is your footprint and that's theirs. From a sales point of view, especially if they're huge things you're selling, so boat engine or something that you can't physically take to a meeting, but you could show them. You could walk them through the whole engine and what goes on.
I think these technologies are, whilst they're cool, and they are very, very cool, you put the headset on and they're very, very engaging. We've got to keep one eye on what value is this actually adding and bringing. And your example really made me think about that. So I'm a big believer in visibility of data. You need to see the data to make decisions and see what's going on. It's a really good holistic, good way of seeing what's going on. And we've used dashboards in the past for this. And Google Analytics or Adobe or whatever SEO tool you're using will have dashboard views. This is the organic, this is how the people come to your site, this is the breakdown of your audience, that sort of thing. But it's limited to whatever size your monitor is, unless you want to make the font smaller. So that I do like your example for the viewing data, and in particular SEO data, because once you put the headset on, you've got all this space around you. You could have a section over here for how people are coming to your site. Is it organic? Is it paid? Another section over here about what are they actually doing on site? Another over here for what you're actually paying for conversion, that sort of way. So you have got all this space for all this data, and therefore you can I think it really does challenge a lot of the preconceptions we've got about visualizing data, if I'm honest, because like I said, we've been doing it from a screen for years and years and years, and no longer do we have to do that. We can surround ourselves with data and walk through it. So yeah, it's an interesting time.
It's quite, I think it could be used for so many things. I was talking to a guy called Alex Moore, who has worked in PR and communications for government and for massive organisations, and more around disaster recovery.
Right.
And so say you have a client that has said something or has been filmed doing something they shouldn't, and it's a real issue. And he said, well, really, you're talking about it's gone viral, 100 million, but is this in a little section of a social media platform? Who really is that? Is this a group of people that would have this opinion of you anyway? The people who have actually seen it, or the other people that are your voters, do they care? And bringing a sense of reality to the situation other than what they feel is a video that's gone viral. What is the actual impact of that from you, from a PR perspective? You could bring all that into, I've made up, I'm assuming you could bring some form of representation.
Any data that represented in 3D, all you have to do is add in another dimension. So we plot a dimension on the y-axis and another dimension on the x-axis. Usually maybe it's time on the x-axis and amount on the y-axis. And then to go in the third dimension, all you need to do is plot another data, which in reality could just be another column in an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to go complex with this sort of stuff. We've created data visualization based on. We've plotted data around carbon emission intensity. We've got one around plotting financial data, which is really interesting because we see like one of two views when we're viewing stocks or markets, and it's these ticker ones that are going up, which is good, or down, which is bad. Green generally means good, and red generally means bad. But like I said, we can use a third dimension, and all of a sudden we can see. Maybe it's not just how well it performed on that day. You need to take into account how it performed previously and the amount traded. Maybe, like say, you could take in the sentiment of the market sentiment. Right? You're using a bit of AI as well at the same time. And the other thing about plotting financial data that I find interesting, or any data, is that if you're doing it with time in mind, like temporal information, like what happened on certain days, you can almost animate the data so that, or bring it to literally make it move. So you like press play, and it will go from what we in 1st of April all the way up to the end of the year. And the data points actually move as day to day. So it just looks like the data's actually alive as it moves around. So that's, again, it's about storytelling and bringing data to life.
I think especially where your business is affected a lot by the seasonal changes. And you could see maybe from a search point of view, how many searches are actually being done at that point for those products. We're just assuming that traffic's gone down, but actually if you look at it year upon year, it's a different story. And if you can show that, it's incredibly compelling, isn't it?
I think so. We think so. So it's about identifying all the use cases we can. And unfortunately, there's a lot of use cases that show data. We're also trying to bring in additional technologies and capabilities. So viewing data in mixed reality is one thing, but when you start to bring in things like real-time communication, so say for example, you're viewing some data in mixed reality, maybe I update a spreadsheet, but we've got real-time communication between the spreadsheet and what you're seeing, then it would update what you're seeing immediately just by updating the spreadsheet, which that's kind of an interesting use case. We'd have to be in the same room, obviously you could be on the other side of the planet. And then multiple people sharing that session across multiple people. So we've got examples where, say you and 20 other people all had a headset on and they update the spreadsheet, all of you would see the same thing. So it being kind of casting to everyone. And if you bring 3D models in there, we can have it so that if I move this 3D model, rotate it, scale it, it then scales up you can see what I'm doing in all the 20 different headsets as well. Vice versa, if you make a change, everyone can see them. It does start to bring in some challenges around, well, how do you stop everyone from being able to move it? So then I like to lean more towards the sort of problems like Teams, for example. If you're presenting, maybe you're fully in control of what people can see, but you can also allow people to flip through the slides or not flip through them. Other people can take control. So it's kind of also borrowing from other examples of how people have built things in mixed reality sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially in the modern day where, so my business, we all work remotely. And the team we were talking about this the other day, how proud I am of how they all work together. And we're then going to talking, well, how can we, because we get together maybe once a month, once a fortnight, have some food or whatever, or if we have work to do, we need to chat about, we'll get together. I always thought maybe we could put VR headsets on and join each other in a boardroom virtually. I thought might bring something a little bit different to the way we communicate within those meetings.
That's certainly one popular use case is the shared collaboration tools. Microsoft are doing that inside Teams, Meta are doing it inside Horizon Worlds, which are really, really pushing at the moment. I think they've got like $10 million? No, $50 million encouraging people to build worlds in Horizon Worlds. So yeah, I think we'll get there. I also have to keep one eye on, like I said, about what the value we're adding when we use these new technologies, but also what sometimes gets overlooked is what we're taking away. So I don't like 3D avatars. Like I sat in meetings. That might sound unusual coming from someone who really is pushing the mixed reality agenda, but that's because I've read loads of books on non-verbal communication. So I love looking at everyone's faces on Teams calls and just seeing how they're reacting to what's being said. You can see if some people are agreeing, if some people don't agree, if they're frowning, if there's not paying attention. So I do think we lose that sometimes because they say, like, I won't quote any statistics, but because people argue about the validity of them, but say somewhere between 60 and 80% of communications non-verbal, none of them were represented by a computer character. We're only just hearing what they're saying. We're missing all that other stuff. So it's great for some things, but not great for other things.
So it's the part of work I enjoyed when we used to go into the office all the time was the chat by the water cooler or by the kettle, where you find out a bit more about someone and you understand what's going on, find out a bit more about what they do, and it brings you closer as in your kind of working relationship to know a bit more about them.
Yeah,
you wouldn't necessarily get that from talking to an avatar. Someone.
It's pros and cons, and lots of different shades of grey. With remote working, for example, some people are very much, we have to do remote working. It makes sense. That's what we should all be doing. Other people are saying, no, we need to return to the office. And I don't know if it's just social media, but I find that we take these polarized views more often than we need to, and then more often than not, the answer is it's somewhere in between. It's sometimes it's good for one thing, and sometimes it's good for another. And so I do blame social media a lot. And they tend to polarize things like if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong. It's well no. In some cases that's a good thing, in other cases it's not a good thing. So like vibe coding is a big one at the moment. So vibe coding is this ability to use AI to quickly create some code, sometimes create full applications that you could run on a web, create an entire website or an entire mobile app. And some people say this is great, we should all be doing this, developers are going to lose their jobs, so this is going to replace developers. And other people say, no, it's not, and it's bad for these reasons, we should never do this. And then the reality is, it's not polarized views one or the other. There's so many shades of grey. It's somewhere in the middle that it's good for one thing, it's not so great for the others. Why do people, some people are more naturally antagonistic than others, I think. Why do we feel like we have to jump to one polarized view and with it. Yeah.
Jack is something real. It's inflicted on everyone as we're growing up, and you sort of will try to be part of.
I think I don't think pragmatism is a skill that's widely as adopted as it should be these days. A lot of people are a lot more dogmatic than they need to or should be. I think healthy amount of pragmatism goes a long way in business and personal development as well.
Yeah. So looking at this kind of technology, what do you think the things we need to be careful of? Well, to use AI, obviously, is the obvious choice. There are concerns about the use of it and how it's used, and potentially its capabilities as it gets more advanced. Do you see any issues like that with the immersive technology side?
That's a good question. I think there's a few areas. I don't think the technology has been used long enough. Obviously, it's been around for years. People say we've had it in the 70s. It's true, probably before. I don't think it's been around as prevalent as it is now to see what the long-term effects are going to be. So if I just think, for example, I would say we're not going to wear these things for hours. And some people say, oh, yes, we will. Again, fine. Disagree with me. It's fine. Let's have a conversation around it. But I don't see how focusing on a screen this far away from your face for 7 hours a day is going to be good for your eyesight. I'm not an ophthalmologist, if that's the right term. I'm not an optometrist. I couldn't tell you. Again, I'm not sure this...
Obvious, isn't it?
In some ways, but other people are saying, no, you're going to be in here for hours at a time. I will go back to saying, probably we're going to create really, really specific use cases that you'll pop them on. It's going to be great for maybe looking at an org chart or looking at some data, interacting in a meeting, or looking at a 3D model you're designing with someone, and then you'll take it off and go back to your normal work process. But yeah, I don't think we're going to be in there for hours. There's be interested to see what they're going to come down with regulation around use on children. So I was at a trade fair that's creating educational content, basically entire lessons and curriculums in history and science in labs. So you put them on. And I was asking them, well, what age range does it kind of start at? And I forget the exact age, but they said they only really recommend it for, I think, 11 years up. Don't hold me to that, but it's so maybe that's because their eyes are still developing. Maybe it's because they're quite heavy, and maybe it's pressure on the neck. I don't know. Some of them. So I think eyesight's one of them. On children is another one, because I guess also when they've got the headset on, you can't see what they're viewing. So there's like and they could open a web browser and look at anything, whereas at least if they're looking at a screen, you can see what they're browsing. So there's got to be controls, parental controls around there. I've not put a huge amount of thought, to be honest, into the risks and challenges around this, but there will definitely be a few more than the ones I've mentioned there.
Yeah. Where do you see the future of that kind of technology? If you could, look into the crystal ball and I remember being in a lecture at university and looking at a phone and looking at, it was a really old phone, and then looking at this camera that I had separate, and then I had my wallet in my pocket and thinking, this will be on one thing at some point. When you think about this kind of technology, do you have that kind of moment where you go, I reckon this will all be like this, or we'll be using it for that? Or
it's interesting because people say, oh, we're still waiting for the one killer app that everyone will jump on and use. I think it's a bit of a perfect storm at the moment, I think, for immersive technology for a few reasons. One is these devices are becoming more prevalent, so there's more of them on the market, which is great, and they're all competing against each other, so the prices are inevitably coming down. So they're becoming very, very popular, both in the consumer side. So they're one of the best-selling devices every Christmas, plus the Quest 3 and Quest 2, for example, the Meta devices. So they are becoming more prevalent. not just in the consumer side, but also the industry side as well. Now, they've historically lent towards more of the high-end devices, like your HoloLens, which was $3,500, or your Apple Vision Pros, which again, $3,500. For me, I don't see the longevity of devices at that price point unless you're targeting use cases that price isn't an issue. Things like people are performing medical operations or industry, maybe manufacturing. I think we're having a BlackBerry moment, whereas they were very much, oh no, we'll focus on enterprise, but actually they got replaced by consumer devices like your Apples and your Androids. So I think the Quest devices and your consumer devices are going to be used for a lot more enterprise purposes. So yeah, there's how prevalent they are in the market. The actual how powerful they are is increasing as well. So the cameras are getting more sophisticated, the processing power, the RAM. So the devices themselves, even the entry-level ones, are becoming more and more powerful so they can do more. The actual hardware manufacturers and the operating systems are allowing you to do more within them. So only recently, Meta have allowed developers to access the camera. So you can actually process images that are coming from the camera. Before that, they didn't allow that, I think, for privacy concerns. So now developers are doing really, really clever AI stuff. So they're taking the raw image and analyzing it, doing OCR, optical character recognition, or anything really. So the hardware manufacturers are allowing more capabilities on the device. So I really do think, and the price point's coming down. So I do think it's a perfect storm for device-wise. And what I like to see is the evolution of these devices as well. And that's continuing to invest. So we're getting to a point where we won't be far away from just the AR glasses going on. And Snap have a pair which you can, if you're a developer, you want to pay monthly, you can get access to and develop stuff for. But again, until they're a point where average Joe can go out and buy a pair, I do have a bit skeptical. But yeah, we'll have the AR glasses eventually. It's just a matter of time. And I hope at that point, the manufacturers have developed them so that any developers can develop for them. So for example, there's an open standard called OpenXR, which a few manufacturers and devices all support, which means if I develop something and it's OpenXR compliant, it'll work on the Quest, the Motion Leap, I forget some more, but some others that support this OpenXR standard. Whereas Apple Vision Pro, for example, they don't support OpenXR. They've kind of walled garden themselves a bit, so you just have to do a complete different tool set to develop for there. I'd love to see them support OpenXR, especially if they want their device to be adopted by the mainstream. So it's about making it easy for developers to develop for these devices as well. If you want to start in immersive technology, just start playing and experimenting with it. I think a healthy dose of what if. That's where a lot of my innovation starts is, well, what if we did this? What if we could do that? What if we tweaked this? What if we could view data in this way? So if you got a healthy amount of play and experimentation with your devices, and you approach it as have that curiosity, like I said, that we often lose as a child, and say, well, what if we did this? I think that's a good starting point for innovation. I think innovation within organizations, I think sometimes the culture's not there. So if your organization can grow a healthy innovation culture, then you out-innovate your competitors. Conversely, you're going to be out-innovated. So you don't really have a choice. You're not going to be around unless you have an culture of innovation. So yeah, that's the other thing I'd say.
I feel like definitely in the kind of online marketing industry, if you don't innovate, you die. Things don't. If you're stuck in the way you worked 5-10 years ago as an SEO person, your methods don't work. And you have to have that mentality of. So what we're seeing, what's going on at the moment, what are the changes? How do we adapt to that? We're seeing this data. What does that mean? how do we work differently to bring that to our advantage?
100%. I would say if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And it's true, but I see a lot of organisations that say, right, we're going to be more innovative, right? What we're going to change? Oh, nothing, but we're going to be more innovative from now on. So it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. There needs to be a change. So yeah, you do need to take first steps. You do need to bring innovation into what you do day to day.
I think I've a few friends who are developers, and it's obviously an industry that's highly affected by questions around AI and whether they'll still be needed and all this kind of stuff. And I've got views on that, but I think ones that just stick with the language that they've always used. This might have always been the case, but I think it's happening a lot quicker now. And don't want to try anything else or learn a new programming language or a way of working. They become kind of, what's the word?
Obsolete.
Obsolete. Yeah. They're not as useful as they might, or as efficient as they could be now. And
it is. I think comfort is the the enemy of progress or something like that. Comfort is the enemy of innovation. What's the phrase? Comfort is the something like that. Anyway,
no, I like it. If it's not, that's
you've got to go out your comfort zone. You've got to learn new things. If you don't, even if you're not learning new things, because everyone else is, you're effectively going backwards. You might think you're staying still, you're actually going backwards because everyone else is learning new things. So any organisation needs to be constantly learning. So at Userware, we had a meeting with our CEO yesterday. He said, carte blanche, any AI tools that you want to use to write code, to come up with ideas, generate images, you have got a full permission to use them, because they know that the organisations that don't do this or have heavily restricted it. Obviously, you've got to be very careful with AI. It can be a gun. You can shoot yourself in the foot if you're not careful with it. But the companies that aren't encouraging the use of AI, I think, again, will be the ones that move backwards and get outperformed.
Interesting subject. So I was on a panel of people. It was a Stockport Digital Network. And it was all about introducing AI tools and thought processes and how to make your business more efficient and and develop quicker. And there was a question on should it be a bottom up or a top down thing? The use of it. And I'm of the opinion that
it's very polarised. Does it have to be one or the other?
Well, I think it's inevitable that the staff will use AI to help them with their job. And once you realise that, then the responsibility of leadership is then to go, this is great, but be careful of this because of these reasons, and use it for this and this. Be careful when you're using code to create code, because that there are issues around that sometimes, or and have that thing of let's use it, but let's really work out what the limitations are and how we can control things a little bit just to protect ourselves. And
as with any new technology, there's a danger if you don't fully understand some of the repercussions from it. So I remember that talk, and someone rightly said, look, if you've got a spreadsheet of client data that you're pulling into some of the AI tools, that's going off to somewhere you don't actually know, and it's actually probably being indexed and used to train other data. Whereas there's some AI tools which are ring-fenced and they guarantee this will not be used to train other models. It can't be leaked in or to other models, and other people can get access to it. But it does worry me a little bit when people don't check or think to check. It's things like, even people were dragging images of their kids to look, here's a picture of my kid that looks in cartoon mode. It's like, well, do you know where that picture of your kid's just gone? It's like, you just need to be a bit careful because you can't. It's a gun. It's a very powerful gun, and you can shoot yourself in the foot if you're not careful.
Yeah. Interesting. I always thought there would be a court case where someone's son or daughter had taken them to court for putting pictures of them as a baby on Facebook.
Well, that happened on the Nirvana CD, didn't it? On the famous "Smells Like Teen Spirit," I think it was the album cover. There's a picture, baby swimming on the front of one of the famous album covers, and I seem to remember a rumor of that child growing up and then not being very happy that there's a picture of it on the front
naked on this album,
or at the very least, they didn't have signed rights to the image. Obviously, they didn't have because their parents did, or maybe they should get royalties. I don't know, but that's like an adjacent argument. But
fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I was thinking in terms of coding. If does it change legally, or any thoughts on open source code and where it brings it from, and if you're using it in another. So, like, if you use an image that you don't have rights to, lawyers will come in and say you've used this illegally, without permission. You owe us this, and perhaps that might be the case with code and other things that are used from.
I think that's still to come out the wash. With that, and we're seeing a lot of noise on social media. I think the recent one was Studio Ghibli. Right. The people, the famous Japanese animation and film creators studio, Ghibli Films, and they were using OpenAI's produced the capability to recreate images in that style. Yeah. And the only reason it can do that is that because it's been trained on a whole host of Studio Ghibli artwork and images. And the creative Studio Ghibli is not very happy about this. He said, look, a lot of effort and time went into coming up with that creative style. To have other people so easily be able to replicate it is a little bit offensive. Is this legal question mark over it? It's not very morally a great thing to do. So he was really appealing to people's common sense, really, and say, look, you would never do this without AI tools. Why all of a sudden is it okay now we've got the AI tools? Yeah. But even Sam Altman, I think his profile image it was at the time of recording, an image of himself in Studio Ghibli style, which seems a bit of a punch in the jaw, I think, to AI copyright laws and stuff like that. But like I said, there's going to be, I think it's going to come out in the wash. There'll be some big legal cases. I don't know how successful they'll be. I imagine there's armies of lawyers all looking at this at the moment. And I think no sooner have they put in their law case together, there's another law problem or question mark around something else in AI. And of course, you're going to have regional differences as well. So there'll be some countries that say, yes, this is fine, others that say, no, it's don't. Just like copyright law, different countries approach that in different ways. Yeah.
Fascinating.
But yeah, it's if in doubt, just be careful. I'd say, let's just have some common sense. Maybe don't copy other people's images.
So yeah, would you have any specific guidance for business leaders, business owners, boards, in how they approach using these technologies, but in a good way, or?
Do you mean in a good way or in a not bad way?
in a one that won't that would limit the damage potential issues.
Yeah, I think a basic understanding of IP, what you can and cannot do, regardless of AI, is probably a prerequisite. Right. And maybe just start with that. Yeah. Copyright, trademarks, what you can and cannot do, intellectual property, and I think what a lot of people forget is whether or not there's no legal precedent when you can or cannot do these things. Yeah. I think there's still a moral obligation that people have I know I can recreate something in this style, or I can put, I don't know, this famous person to make it look like they're in the living room. Should you? I'm sure that famous person probably don't want their image reused and make it look like they're in their living room. But I think a lot of people don't stop and think about the moral and just being respectful of other people's images. And I think if everyone did that a bit more, then a lot of the legal stuff would go away. No, that's not true. The legal stuff would still be there, but they wouldn't be so prevalent. And so I'd say, yeah, just know what legally you can and cannot do, and that you need to look at probably the bigger bodies of the regulations and law than I could probably spout. But also just think about morally as well. I think a lot of people use legal as a compass. I think we forget what we morally think we should and shouldn't do as well.
It's that famous line from Jurassic Park, isn't it? Just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah, no, it's I think they're releasing another one of them films, aren't they?
Oh, are they?
Yeah, it's the cinemas here. Film number 5 or 6. But yeah.
Amazing.
Just because you can release another Jurassic Park film, does that mean you should?
Yeah, yes. That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like probably
We've talked a lot, haven't we? We've talked about innovation in general. We've covered some of the immersive technology, and we've then gone on to AI.
I think the main thing for anyone listening is to have a play and experiment with.
I think so. And I'd say if you got to a point where you're unsure as to whether AI or XR or any sort of innovative technology could be of use to your business, I'd say go find a technology partner that can help out. And that can be a small, medium, or I would say, or a big business. I think you'll get big businesses that will charge big dollars just to sit in the same room with them. But I think a lot of small businesses are pretty clued up, some of the technology partners, and people like you are more than happy to have conversations, even if it's just to see, is this possible? Like I said, these technology partners they know what the art of the possible is. So just have some conversations with them. It'd be really helpful, I think, for your business, because you will be out innovated if you're not careful.
Yeah. Um, Well, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Really interesting chat, which I knew it would be, which is why I asked you to come on, and I appreciate your time and coming to sunny Macclesfield. So,
Yes, it is pretty good. Unusually sunny today.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. All done.
Cool. All right.